All right, we're back, and in this segment, we're going to talk about Carl Rogers, who, if you ask a person to think of a humanist, this is if you ask a psychologist to think of a humanist, this is probably the first person who would come to mind, because he sort of I just want to say he got like a lot of attention for his theory. His theory is very straightforward, and so he got a lot of attention. I'm going to pause you for a second because you might have heard my dog bark. I'm going to go see what he's barking at, so I'll be right back. Well, it would turn out to be the neighbors going outside. The nerve. All right, back to Rogers. All right, so the basic principles of Rogers' perspective about how a healthy personality develops is that when they were being raised, they received from their caregivers three main things. One is the caregivers behaved in a genuine fashion. They were honest with the children, they were direct, they didn't put up a front or pretend to be feeling a certain way. They behaved in a very authentic way, which is a term I'm going to hit on a little bit later from another theorist. But so they behaved, they displayed what Rogers called genuineness. I gave us a picture of Winnie the Pooh because he's so genuine that, I don't know if that's even called genuine. He's like so just always out there and he says everything he thinks. You don't have to be that genuine as a parent, but what a child needs to feel is that their parents are being their real selves, that they're not playing the role of parent, that they're not putting on a show or something like that. They're being honest. They're being direct. They don't give you might have had experiences like this with people who they don't directly ask for what they want. They sort of suggest that it's something that could be needed. And then if you're not really aware of their speaking style, you may not realize that what they're asking is to borrow something that you have or for you to help them do something. They didn't directly ask it. And so you don't really get what they're asking for. Rogers says that for children, they don't get like 90% of what's going on around them. And so they need their parents to be very direct and very specific. One of the things that he talked about is how with little children, toddlers and younger, probably preschoolers and younger, they don't really understand the sentence structure that includes the word not. So if you say to a child, that's not good, they don't necessarily get that sentence structure and understand that not means that if it's not good, then it means that it's bad. A lot of parents are reluctant to say that's bad because they're afraid that it'll like harm their child's ego or something like that. But Rogers says you need to be direct. You can say that's wrong. You don't want to say you're bad. He is not arguing for that. But he is arguing that, pouring the water that's onto the floor, that's naughty. Or that's you're making a mess or something direct, right? Don't pour the water, you're making a mess, right? Like that's a direct thing to say. It's not you're bad boy, bad girl. It's just a direct request for what you need. And he says that's really super important for little children because that way they feel like they understand where their parents are coming from. Children need to receive from their parents unconditional positive regard. This person's looking in the mirror and saying, looking good. It's not that superficial. Unconditional positive regard. Other humanists have often referred to this as acceptance. This is where you express to the child that even when they do stuff that's wrong, you're still lovable. I still love you. That you are my child. You will always be my child. These kinds of things. So you accept them for who they are. And so not with a stereotyping way though. I was thinking about my mentor and his three sons. When you have three of the same sex, a lot of times it's really much more common for parents to stereotype them based on like very superficial likes and dislikes so they can kind of try and distinguish them from one another rather than just getting to know them and finding out what they really are like. Like let them grow up and let us figure out what how they differ personality wise. They'll instead sort of project stuff onto them and say things like my mentor said, oh yeah, this one is really scholarly and this one's our athlete. The other one was too little for him to characterize yet. And so for the little one to be too little to characterize yet means that the oldest one was like 6 and the younger one was like 4. I mean, seriously, this one's the scholarly one and this one's the athlete at 6 and 4. But this is what oftentimes we do. We say, we stereotype our children instead of saying, I accept you for who you are. And I want to find out who you are. As you grow and develop as a child, you're going to become more and more yourself as you age. And so parents who show unconditional positive regard for their children are really looking forward to finding out who their kids are going to be, what kind of person they're going to be. When their kids express strong emotions or strong feelings, their parents need to acknowledge those feelings and not judge them for them. Not say, don't come at me angry, or, don't backtalk me, or, these kinds of things that a lot of times parents will say. Instead, saying, I can see that you're angry. I hear what you're saying, but we're still going to have to do it the way that I'm saying we're doing it. Like, it's okay to not cave to their feelings, but you acknowledge their feelings. I can see that you're upset. I understand that. You don't have to escalate at all. No degree of upsettedness is going to change what's happening right now. Like, we still have to put on our shoes and go. When my daughter was like 5, she really got into this phase where if she was doing something, she did not want it to change. So, if she'd be playing with something, even though she had been forewarned an hour ago, that after this, we have to, go pick up daddy from school, she would get all engaged with what she was doing. And I would tell her, okay, it's time to get our shoes on. And she'd be like, nah, start flipping out. And I would have to just acknowledge her feelings. I know you're upset. I know you want to continue playing, but we got to go get dad. It doesn't matter how upset you are. We still got to go get dad. Right. So, acknowledging it and not judging it. I'm not mad at you because you're upset. I get it. It doesn't matter that you're upset because we still have to do what we're doing. So that's the key thing, is acknowledging the feelings without judging them for having those feelings. You're not a bad person because you don't want to stop what you're doing. You're not a bad person because you just revealed something about yourself to me. I remember when my son was in high school, and don't tell him I told you this, but he apparently had learned on the internet how to have the conversation with his parents about the fact that he's a furry. And I'm laughing now because now he's this has been 10 years and he's like, obviously he doesn't still wear a tail. But he went through a phase where he was wearing a tail and he thought that we might have upset feelings about it. I made him 2 tails once he told me. I'm like, here's when you want to look like a wolf, and here's when you want to look more like a coyote. I don't know. He was some kind of canid. I don't know what he was anyway. He thought we were going to judge him. And, I did ask him some questions that he didn't like because I teach human sexuality. So I asked him some questions about, like some statistically accurate questions having to do with people who are furries. And he said that those didn't describe him, that he just really wanted to wear a tail. And I actually took him to a furry convention when it came to Seattle. And we sat in on the talks and did all the things and, did our, I like going to conventions. I have no problem with a convention. We watched the furry parade and everything. And so it was fun. And I had students back then who were furries and would do like the whole costume. And one of my students showed me how he made a head with the, all by himself and covered it with fur. And it really looked amazing. And my son thought I was going to judge him for it. And I'm like, I know this is just a thing. I just wanted I did have some questions to ask. And he thought that those might be judgmental questions. I'm like, I'm asking you statistical questions. Like, statistically, this is what's likely to happen. So do these things describe you? And if they do, then I need you to let me know. You are underage. So I need you to let me know. But he never, even though we showed unconditional positive regard, we accepted him for whoever he was, we acknowledged his feelings without judgment, he still feared, like most of us do, that that unconditional positive regard might actually have some conditions on it. Rogers calls these conditions of worth, where I love you as long as, I think you're a valuable person as long as you do your chores. I think you're a valuable person as long as your opinions are in alignment with mine. I think you're a valuable person as long as you keep striving towards the goals that I've set for you. Like that. As soon as you do something wrong, you'll find out that I don't really value you like I've been saying that I do. And I think every child carries a little bit of that fear with them. no matter how unconditional the positive regard has been, every kid kind of worries that they're going to find the limit of their parents' acceptance and that they're ultimately going to get rejected. And, some of us have really big things that we have to reveal to our parents that we're worried our parents will say, okay, that's it. You have hit the limit. Others of us probably have smaller things that we worry our parents will reject us for, right? Like we don't want to disappoint them. We don't want them to be unhappy with us. We don't want them to judge us. And so, Rogers argues that we need to display unconditional positive regard. I would just like to say on the child's perspective, it may always feel like there are certain conditions of worth, no matter how accepting parents are, no matter how parents try to convey, unconditional positive regard. Now, the last thing, I don't know how well you can see it on the screen because the hyperlink color is like green, so it doesn't look super awesome. But the last thing I wanted to talk about under the category of unconditional positive regard is the use of punishment. A lot of people who read Carl Rogers, who, were lay people and were using Rogers' model to raise their children, interpreted Rogers as saying you should never give your child consequences or use punishment, as the word is used in learning theory, for an outcome, right? Like you should never punish your child. First off, hopefully you learned from the discussion on behaviorism that punishment is not spanking or grounding or something. Punishment is an outcome that the learner doesn't want, right? And so Rogers is arguing that you need to have some punishments for behaviors that are out of alignment. You have to have some kind of consequences for when your child does not behave in the appropriate way. Every child behaves inappropriately sometimes. My sweet, perfect granddaughter sometimes behaves badly. My adorable little grandson sometimes behaves badly and needs some kind of consequence for that, right? And usually when you're little, it's about, breaking something on purpose or pouring something out on purpose. I have to say I was not happy with him the other day when he was over here and knocked on purpose, just poured out the gallon of water that's in the dog bowl onto my floor. I didn't mind the floor as much because it's vinyl, but it was going towards the baseboard that is made out of that compressed paper stuff that if it gets wet, it like starts to expand. I'm like, nah! And just my reaction of, oh no, my baseboard was enough to, I think, punish him. He did not like that reaction. He's only just coming up on 2 years old. He didn't like that I was upset, and I didn't even direct it at him. I was honestly looking at the water. I was trying to block it from the baseboard. And I'm like, no! And he didn't appreciate that, but I don't think he's going to be punished. I don't think he's going to be pouring out dog water in the future because it was probably pretty punishing for him to see grandma get upset. So punishments can take lots of different forms, but this is probably one of the most heated things that ever happens in any of my personality theory classes is when we talk about Rogers' perspective on punishment and people who honestly believe that as a humanist, you would never want to give negative consequences to your child. That is not what Rogers said at all. That is not what he said. He said that punishment needs to fit the crime, for one thing. So after I blocked the baseboard, there was still a gallon of water to be mopped up. So grandson had to get a towel, and he was completely inept, but he was helping me to clean up because that's the consequence. Like that's the normal thing that happens when you're trying to do humanistic kinds of punishments, right? Is that you try and make sure it fits the crime. So you spilled water, you clean up water. Right, like that. And so that hopefully it's less fun to dump water in the future. Of course, one of the downsides of that, the learning theorists will tell us, is maybe that becomes rewarding. Maybe you like cleaning up water. So you never know what is punishing for the learner. But Rogers definitely said you have to punish in a way that the learner will get the message. He didn't advocate for physical punishment in any way. He was not saying spankings. He was saying consequences that the learner will not like, and that will help to shape the behavior, just like behaviorists said. But he was just arguing that you can't always be saying yes without ever saying no. Like you can't always be saying, I love you, that's great. I love you, that's great. I love you, that's great. And never give any guidance about the times that they're doing something wrong. So I'm going to set up in the playlist a scene from the Brady Bunch, and most of you are probably too young to even know what that is, but it was a classic 1960s show where clearly they wrote the parents to be very Rogerian humanists as far as disciplining the children. And so I found a scene that I think is a really good example of the parents giving the kind of lots of explanation, lots of guidance, lots of love as they give consequences, and then tell their child, if you do this again, the consequences will be worse, right? Like, so don't push us. So I'll put that next in the playlist, and then I'll see you on the other side.